Welcome back to Live from Luo's. We're in the back room here of Luo's Peking House on Marion Street in downtown Oak Park. Thanks for joining us again. Sorry, we actually haven't done this.
A little bit of a hiatus.
A little bit of a hiatus.
Yeah.
I understand you were busy.
I was.
Can you
we welcomed the first McNeil, the baby McNeil, so it's been a busy couple months here.
Well, congratulations, Dad.
Adding to the population boom, right? Or the population problem in the world.
Well, and I want to introduce our guest today, who is remarkably well known internationally, although you might not recognize him immediately unless you were an arcade game, video game devotee, and then you know immediately who this guy is. It is Doc Mack of Galloping Ghost Productions, Galloping Ghost Arcade, and your newest Galloping Ghost. I get, is it a vertical? Are these all verticals within the Galloping Ghost empire?
Yeah.
What is the official name of your latest venture?
There's actually two other ones.
There's more. Yeah.
Galloping Ghost Gamma, and we just opened Galloping Ghost Reproductions.
Okay. Well, we'll get into. We'll get.
And let me
into
just say that Galloping Ghost is based in Brookfield.
It
so
is
that's,
right.
that's
It basically takes up the entire length of Ogden Avenue from Custard to Everly on both sides of the street. No, the footprint has expanded quite a bit.
It's been a busy last couple of years for sure.
Right. And actually, before we got started, and for those of you who really don't know what the Galloping Ghost Arcade, which was the kind of foundational piece of the puzzle, at least from a visibility standpoint, on Ogden Avenue, the arcade itself, which is, what's the address?
9415 Ogden Avenue.
Right. And you might be surprised at exactly how many classic arcade games is in this building, because, and one is added at least every week on Monday.
Yep.
But how many games are you up to?
So, right now, last Monday we put out our 643rd game, and tomorrow we'll have one more going up.
So are there 642 games on the floor?
Yeah.
Yikes.
It's actually...
This is like an airplane hangar.
We've expanded from just the original building. We spilled over into the second building, and then into the third building, and now we're going into the fourth building, which that's the longest building on the block, so we'll be adding probably around 200 more machines.
So upwards of 900 video games?
Yep.
And these are old arcade style, like Bally type, the old Chicago
Pac-Man
build.
and Space Invaders, all the way up through new stuff. And
I don't mean to jump on your intro here, but basically this is it's a daily fee. Is it $20 a day?
Yep.
Kind of unlimited play.
Stay until we close. And
do you have? So I don't know. I can only imagine some of the, and I understand people come in from overseas to take advantage of this in some ways, but like there's a whole scene. But do you kick people out, or do they sleep over? Like what? How does this? Do you have like a hostel? Is there a gamers hostel? I mean, this must be something you're thinking about, like an Airbnb for your visitors.
There's two apartments over the restaurant to the east of us, which if and when we do acquire that building, we'll make that the Galloping Ghost hostel.
Love
is what we'll have just for our out of town, out of country visitors.
Do you own all of this property?
No,
or you're
no.
Okay.
We're renting right
leasing
now.
It, okay.
Hopefully, we'll be buying soon. But.
Before you got here, Brett, Doc and I were talking about the kinds of numbers we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is kind of again, it's largely, I think, invisible even to Brookfield generally. I mean, it's because people are coming in on Ogden Avenue and kind of staying in this neighborhood here. But you said yesterday was your busiest day ever.
Yes.
And so give people an idea of what that actually means. I'm thinking it's like 75 people.
Our previous busiest day was 798 people on one Saturday. No events running, just that's who showed up.
Right.
And yesterday we had 925 people show up for the day.
Are they coming in buses? I mean, how are you accommodating all of these people? There's no parking on Ogden there, really, is there? I mean, very little.
On the side streets, there's some.
Side streets.
Or are they all riding their skateboards? No, I'm kidding.
We do have
Probably
people
parking
take
in
the
the
train. There's very minimal parking around, which
Okay.
has always been one of the things that it's been a concern, and it's something that we're very much looking for a way to make even better. Like the side streets all had 2-hour parking, which
Doesn't work for your people.
Right.
Yeah.
So
When you're deeply into the video gaming, the hours go by.
Not going out to
pretty
move the
quickly,
car.
I guess.
we have so many people that literally there'll be a line at the door at 11 a.m. And we try to open early when we can. When we see people out there, we want to get them in as early as possible. But they'll stay until 2 in the morning. They'll go out, and you talked about with the people who are in from out of town. They'll stay at the Colony or surrounding motels or hotels. And that's one of the best things for Brookfield. It's been great just because like they come, they go out, they want to get lunch. They'll go
Right.
to Tony's or Canton's or Danny's down the street, and it's like it's so beneficial for all the surrounding businesses.
Gosh,
So-
I mean, I had no. I mean, so 1,000. This is like it's you. Well, let's say the Zoo,
Yeah, it's the
Irish
Zoo.
Irish Times, and then Galloping Ghost. It's what it
and
sounds like, right?
That's essentially, I think, correct.
it's like there's a lot of great places in Brookfield. For us, when we started, the only time you heard of, even I heard about arcades was when they were closing. So
Right.
we really opened at a very good time, and just I have a very obsessive compulsive personality, which has really led to getting all these games, and it's been one of those things. It's caused a lot of attention to be drawn to it, and we haven't spent $1 on marketing.
This is
It's
all just word of mouth
word
in
of
this
mouth,
community.
and-
I don't know if we said this. I've forgotten. But when did you open the arcade?
Friday, August 13th, 2010, Friday the 13th.
So we're not even at 8 years at this point. And you so talk a little bit. You talked about accumulating these now 650 going on 900 games. Where are they coming from?
They're all over the world, really. Like our first batch, I picked up 114 machines out in Denison, Iowa, and we brought those back. And of those 114, only 8 turned on. So there's huge amounts of restoration going on within the arcade.
And did you find an old tech from the 70s and 80s who was working in arcades across the Chicago area to do the rehab work on the machines, or did you figure that out?
Oh, it was so because of the Galloping Ghost Productions, which we opened in '94, which was meant to do arcade games and console gaming. It was for me getting all those games. I had 3 arcade games that I had purchased back when I was 16 years old, and I tore them all apart and rebuilt them and figured out how they worked. And that was really, I had some knowledge of it, but there's so many different board types, and it was getting that many machines. It was just jump into them, tear them all down, and rebuild anything and everything just to make them all work.
Did these Denison, Iowa machines, were they out of an arcade, or was this like a distributor that went out of business?
It was a distributor that was getting out of it, and it's been so. He had another warehouse in Tennessee, so drove out there. Same thing. They were all in trailers, and most of them hadn't been touched or turned on for 20 years. Brought them all back, started rehabbing those. And when we opened, we had 130 machines on the floor, and it was we had a bunch of games that weren't yet ready to go. So in doing that, that was how we marketed things. It's always showing what's going to be coming up next. So while people came in, and we had a great opening night. It was just packed.
So from the outset, there was interest.
Oh, absolutely. It was profitable after about 8 months.
See, it's almost kind of mystifying because you opened, well after the initial heyday of video arcades that were there were a lot of them in the Chicago suburbs and in the city even. And then, there was, the PlayStation, Xbox, revolution.
Game console revolution,
see,
right.
And I thought, because, I'm old enough to touch, that that because the console gaming had taken over, that there would have been no reason to need arcades anymore. So why would anyone ever go to one? So what did you understand that totally escaped me?
Well, for me, the whole reason why I had wrote the initial business model was I wanted my guys. We're working on a fighting game called Dark Presence, and it's similar to a game Mortal Kombat, which was made here in Chicago. And I had Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 in my basement, and it was great, but my guys, most of them hadn't played Mortal Kombat out in an actual arcade. So it was, hey, let's go out and play it somewhere.
And when you say your guys, who are you talking about?
These at the time were the guys from Galloping Ghost Productions.
And okay, see, this is a complicated business, and so let's go back to 1994, 24 years ago. You're not that old of a guy. How old were you when you started Galloping Ghost Productions in 1994?
I was 15 or 16 at the outset of it.
And that was specifically created to create Dark Presence as
Yes.
an arcade game.
Yes.
And that's still
A standalone, like literally a game that you would stand in over a Bally type box.
It was
that would go into an arcade like the one that you own.
Yes.
Okay, it wasn't meant to be a Nintendo type.
It was
title.
We had always discussed about it being that, like possibly for the Sega Genesis at the time, which looking back is forever ago. Mm-hmm. But it was very. The game back then was very large, and the amount of like RAM and processing power that we had needed to make this game work, the computers weren't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
It was very like games were 8 megs of data, and we were like CD burners weren't even out yet. So once we started, CD burners came out, we would have 50 CDs with our game on it, with the artwork for it. It was just, there was nothing even remotely close to anybody trying to make a game this large. So we were working on it. We had some amazingly talented people writing code, and it took.
How many people would you have as your team?
Well, our initial team was. We had our one programmer, our music guy, an artist. It was like 6 or 7 people.
Were these all teenagers too, or were the okay?
It was.
This is the band. This is great.
It really was. It was just kind of like none of us knew each other, and people were, "Oh, I heard you're working on something. I'm really serious about it. Can I get in on this?" And literally, it went from just being this like, I didn't know if I wanted to go work for my own company or if I wanted to go work at Midway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
wow.
I had a chance encounter with Ed Boon, who's the guy that created Mortal Kombat, and he was literally like, it's so hard to get into this industry, even back then. And it's really what pushed me to just be like, okay, I'm opening up my own company. And as we started working on things, people came to us. They had just heard people talking about it. And, oh, I heard you're in the studio filming something. And it just kind of went from there. Just friends of friends. And
so this game of yours is still, has it ever been released? Is
No.
it still gestating?
We had, from 94 to 2004, we were pretty much wrapping it up. And it was fun to play. It wasn't done, but it was looking very dated by that point, because we had just used cameras, just
Right.
non-industry cameras to film the whole thing. And technology had advanced so much. HD now was a thing, so
Right.
it was, the game plays fun, but it's going to look like a 10-year-old game already. So 2004, we went back into our filming studio, and we had the idea, okay, well, if our post-production takes anywhere near that long, we might as well film the second game right now, called Conquering Light, just because 10 years later we'll probably be all too old to film anymore. So let's get that filmed and out of the way.
Can't be doing violent combat.
Right.
And just to be, you're in the game.
Yeah, I did all the fight. I played a few of the characters. I did all the fight choreography for it. So it was good that we filmed then, but we were literally in our filming studio for 4 years, filming 7 days a week. And it was, at that point, we went from having just a handful of actors to now, because there's 2 games worth of actors, there's 15 people. That
like an acting troupe.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, the film studio is not, some back lot at some big, production facility somewhere, right?
It was a warehouse that we converted, again,
in Brookfield?
In Brookfield.
Yeah.
In Brookfield. There was... It was just pretty much down an alley. Steve Campbell, who we get so many of our buildings from, he was like, "What do you want this for?" And I'm like, "Hey, we're trying to make this video game." And he's like, "I don't know what even you're
what
talking
does that mean?"
about." Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, "What do you mean? You need a place to film what for a video game? It's all drawn." And explain it to him, and he was so helpful to us in getting where we are now, just because he was like, well, yeah, I have the space, just you take it, just use it.
Do you think that you'll ever release these two games?
We are doing a show next weekend with all the characters playable. Like after we got out of our filming studio, we went right into post-production, and that took... we did post-production for 2 years, and then the arcade opened, which we literally had to take a 5-year hiatus because all my production guys then had to go work the arcade. And it took a couple years to get everybody back where they were supposed to be. Like our one of our designers, he's running the register. It's like he doesn't want to be doing that, but for the good of the company, he's doing it. Now we've grown, and our production team is actually bigger than the arcade team. So we're almost done with it.
So how many employees in your empire at this point? And I'm just going to say, and I don't mean any disrespect, this sounds like Guns N' Roses in like Chinese Democracy. Will it ever come out?
It's actually the longest game in production. There's a game called Duke Nukem Forever that took like 17 years to come out, and it came out and it didn't do that well. And we joke, it's like, oh, they rushed it. They must have rushed it.
It'd take some time to really work out the kinks.
Yeah, but we've had some tremendously loyal fans that have followed us from the start of it, and we're very closed off about what we show. The internet is so, like, we put out a screenshot and people are so harsh from a screenshot. Like there's the
typical,
for
right?
sure
It's a pot-shotting medium.
Yeah, but so we've kind of been like, oh, you'll see it if you come to our shows and stuff, and the response has just been tremendous. The interest levels have been extremely high. Like, we were still in our filming studios, and there's a magazine in Europe that found out about us, and they put our screenshots on the cover of their magazine, and they're, oh, when's it coming out? And it's like, all we can do is kind of
18 years.
Yeah. But it should be before the end of this year. Finally,
and it seems, if you've got 1,000 people a day coming to, you have a built-in audience potentially to like leak, beta test this, right?
Absolutely.
And enthusiastic participants in that beta testing.
We have, back in the day, that's been one of the greatest things from the production side to the arcade side. It has helped on so many different levels. Like, we get to talk to so many industry people like Brian Colin, who made games like Rampage, and Jeff Lee, who made Qbert, and George Petro, and Eugene Jarvis, and all these guys who made all these great games. And you get to hear the stories about how they would have to go to an arcade, get the game on the floor, and then they would have these little time periods where they could go in and just kind of sit behind them and watch them, watch people react to them. And now we can just, okay, let's take this down the street and see what people say. We have the full spectrum. We know the players so well that we know a casual player and we can use their input accordingly. We know the pro players, so we can use their input accordingly. We can also tap all the industry people that we know. Like there's so many of the industry people that we've had in, and they're like, why are you taking 18 years to do this game? And it's like get it out there, get it done. Then you show them what it is, and the reactions have been like, you're insane. Like, why would you make a game like this?
Well, let's talk about. I mean, you're talking these individuals from the yesteryear of gaming. I mean, Chicago this was at one time sort of the epicenter of arcade games,
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, first pinballs and then Midway, and was Bally here?
Yep.
Williams,
Bally, Midway, all
this is
all
like
merged.
my childhood in those arcades in the greater Palos Park region. You know, they were all full of those machines. And so were those individuals, the people making those, were they here?
Yes, they were. Most of them were. Stern was here in Chicago. Konami. Even now, that still holds true because you have Stern Pinball with Steve Ritchie. They're still like the top pinball company.
And they manufacture here?
They manufacture here. Raw Thrills and Play Mechanics. That's George Petro and Eugene Jarvis, who were making games in the 80s. They're making the top games like Big Buck Hunter and...
Oh, that's a Chicago game.
Yep.
And do they make their way to your place?
Oh, we have... we call them developer days. So usually we'll tap a few of the industry people and have them come out and just talk about the games that they made back in the day. Mm-hmm. And those stories, that's been... honestly, it started where they didn't even know how big it was going to get. It was like they figured, yeah, maybe there'll be one or two people that want to come see me. I'm just some guy that makes video games. But those are the movie actors and movie directors of this whole video gaming culture. And they've never really gotten their just due or time in the spotlight. But these games, they're played after 30 years. Mm-hmm. No different than people listen to record or CDs or watch movies from back in the day. And these are the actual people. So when we started getting those guys out and they started telling all these crazy stories about how the industry was and why they made games the way they did, it gave this avenue to all this information. And the players they genuinely love these games, and you can see the people showing their kids these games, and that's really what perpetuates it. Mm-hmm. It's no different than back in the 80s when my mom and dad would take me to an arcade or my brother would take me to one. I see families having that same interaction.
Like a generational handoff of sorts.
Absolutely. And it's people playing Rampage.
Well, there's video games have emerged. I'm of a particular age in my early 40s. I mean, I kind of lived through the rise of Atari. It is now a dominant subculture. I mean, we've got competitive professional gaming, right? Like esports.
Oh, yeah. I have sons who watch
others play.
You know, it's like I don't understand it, but I mean, it's a real thing.
So I want to get to that eventually, but I want to ask you about the arcade aesthetic and why you think it's important, and maybe the people coming to play your games. Why is it important to them to play the game in that setting?
Well, we take there's a huge social aspect to it. Like the venues, and again, one of the reasons why we opened the arcade, we weren't able to find a working Mortal Kombat machine. The reason arcades kind of went away, and there's several. One though was that the operators really became complacent. They're just tired of fixing stuff. It's a constant struggle to maintain these machines. When you look at games like Space Invaders came out in 78, Asteroids came out in 79. most people say the big crash happened in 83, 84. You're talking 5 or 6 years.
Of heyday.
Which even that's kind of gray because it really just...
What happened in 83, 84? Is that like ColecoVision and the gaming starts moving into the homes and out of the arcades?
The console stuff really hit, and it just kind of was evolving away. But to others, that was really the start of it. There's a lot of different perspectives to what's happened. And like the numbers that Pac-Man were bringing in and Space Invaders were just astronomical. Right. But there were so many more games coming out, and it took everybody was trying to get in on it.
You think there was a saturation level of some sort at the same time that the machines were moving into homes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The games, however, though, as they change, like the people that think that the arcades died in 83, a lot of the collector side didn't evolve with it because it went on to they changed up to a system called JAMA, which was they standardized everything, so you could buy an arcade cabinet.
Oh, and run different games on the same on the same cabinet.
Take the board out,
yeah,
put a
kind of
board
boring.
in. Yeah,
right.
It allowed the games to be more inexpensive
but a uniformity that's kind of dull.
Well, it was an internal uniformity.
Mm-hmm.
The players never saw it, but the collectors did.
Oh, okay.
And to some people, they think that's where, like, they don't like the classic stuff. They like the JAMA stuff. And there's been a consistent evolution that seems to happen every 7 or 8 years. And it's every time somebody says, oh, the industry's dead, it's just them getting out of the industry.
And when you say the industry, you mean arcades.
Arcade gaming,
mm-hmm.
yeah. But new people are constantly coming in and finding it, and it's becoming their new interest.
Do you think that there are some parallels? I mean, I've always owned records because I'm old enough to have had records when I was a little kid, but now there is a resurgence of interest in vinyl. Vinyl now is selling again. It's like leading sales numbers in the music industry. Do you see parallels between young people, and there's a bit of a audiophilic, obviously, element to it, and there's a nostalgia vibe to it, and there's a repudiation of cheap garbage MP3s and compressed music online. There are unbelievable graphics available to play at home right now, like Fortnite, kind of cartoony, but like massive game, huge and kind of fun and very. I'm a car racing fan, like iRacing, mm-hmm. looks like the race cars. It's incredible. I don't think that what you're talking, like there aren't the same levels of resolution and that sort of computing going on in these arcade games. What do you make of the interest in, walking down to the arcade and playing in that social setting as opposed to plugging into Fortnite? I know not everybody's a 15-year-old boy, plugging into Fortnite and then having 100 people that you're playing with around the world.
Well, it's how the games are made and the intention of how the games play has changed. And I don't think that's something that really ever gets discussed. Like these games that came out in the early 80s, there was so much innovation going on. When you made a game, you tried to make it not like every other game. Now, and there was 3 guys working on it. So it was, a lot of the games were just labors of love of people.
What do we want to make? What do we want to see?
Yeah, let's come up with something that these people haven't seen before. And now that there's thousands and like it went from you have 3 or 4 guys working on a game to now you have 5,000 people working on a game. Like you watch massive industry, like huge budgets. You get people from like the new Mortal Kombat games or Fortnite or World of Warcraft. They have to make money, otherwise it's a high risk thing.
Right.
So you see so many games that are tied to IPs, like anything. It's everything's based on a movie if they're going to put one out, and it's very safe because they have to make money to stay open. And
this is like Hollywood, frankly. I mean, these are big tent
absolutely
productions.
Right. Well, I mean, if you finish a game like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and then if you take the time, you can sit through the credits, and they go on forever. I mean, you're watching credits for 15 minutes after those games.
It's so funny. We look at credits, and it'll be like, oh, here's the people that put the text in. And it's like, oh, that's bigger than everyone in my company. It's like, okay.
Right.
We're talking about modern gaming and the culture of modern gaming. I'm not even going to pretend to understand what Gamergate was about, but I know enough to know that this was really an issue of like sexism in the gaming industry and criticism of like a female gaming reviewer, right? What does your audience look like? Is it a bunch of young dudes or middle-aged dudes? Are there any women in the arcade? And like, what does the arcade world look like in terms of gender equity?
It's
if that's something that happens in the arcade world.
Like at our place, the demographic is everyone. It's kids, it's adults, we have people there was a couple, they're in their 80s.
Wow.
And they come in.
Play.
That's all they want to do. We had this one woman.
Do you give them a chair?
There's
ageism in the arcade.
I'm just saying that it's probably a nice gesture.
Right? No,
that's
it's
all.
true.
It's it's a demographic that it's when you go to discuss the demographic of it, it doesn't even seem possible. It's like it's men, it's women.
All of the names that you've mentioned about the founding fathers are all men. Were there any women making these games at the Chicago houses?
Oh, absolutely.
Are they as celebrated as I don't know the Eugene? What was the name that you used?
They are Eugene Jarvis. There are a lot of the industry people. Some of them are difficult to track down. A lot of them are that we've seen are even hesitant to come out and talk about a lot of this stuff because they're like, it's 30 years ago. Like they have no idea the impact. And
it's like the Blues Masters almost. It's like tracking down, the Hill Country Bluesmen, and they didn't know what they had. Right?
They've got all the stories though, and the players too. We've had players, and going back to the gender stuff, it's a great media point, and most of the coverage that we see is like, oh, it is like Gamersgate and stuff. And it's not that we have like a utopian society going on here, but none of that ever comes up. Mm-hmm. Like we've had women set world records. We had this girl, Caitlin Oliver. She set a tremendous. She had a world record score in a game called Splatterhouse, which she took from Anthony Paparo, and it became worldwide news. Like it was on every website she's on, and it's like that's awesome, but it was commonplace for us. It's like we don't separate it by gender at our place because girls can set scrollers just like guys, and they do all the time. Like my girlfriend has the world record in Flicky, and it's like that's amazing, but no more amazing than one of the scores that the guys set, because it's not like they don't have people holding them back. It's same thing with kids. There's this Austin Swan who's really young, and he took a world record down that had been up since like the 80s
on an arcade game?
An arcade game. And it's like it's a tremendous accomplishment.
That's fun. That's very fun.
And to be clear, the world records, I mean, there are official, like there's an official way
arbiter
to calculate. Well,
are there like rules?
The only official arbiter.
Oh, okay.
So tell them about
interesting.
That.
There's two. Twin Galaxies has always been considered the keepers of the score, and it's been around since the 80s. It was initially created by Walter Day, and it's changed hands many times. It's still incredibly popular. It's kind of thing like Guinness uses Twin Galaxies to say who has the world records. Back right when we were a few years before we opened, I was writing the business model. There's a website that opened up called Orcade, and it was an arcade tracker. So you could find out where arcades were and what games they had. So we started driving all over, and we found 80 locations in Illinois, like pool halls and laundromats, and any place that had arcade games we would go to, and we'd write down what games they had, and we'd put it in on this site. So the owner of that site eventually came out, and he was going to an arcade in New Hampshire called Fun Spot, which at the time was the largest arcade in the world. They've been around forever and was just crazy popular amongst. You would go there to set your scores. David Hernley, who is the owner and creator of Orcade, started coming out to us, and he's like, "Oh, we're looking at making a branch off something different than Twin Galaxies, and we want to make it so it has its own rule sets." And we were like, "Oh, that's amazing! I think that is going to be incredibly beneficial to arcades. If it's not only can you find out where the games are, but if it's a place that has a high level of credibility and takes us very, very seriously." So as the years went by, we started helping a lot of arcades open, and for us, setting scores at our place was a tremendous draw. At the time, we had maybe 25 arcade games that we were the only location in the world that you could go play them.
So if you want to set the high score, you're going to Brookfield.
You had to.
Yeah.
It was you unless you could get a referee to go to your house and like verify your score. So as that grew, that became like such a huge marketing element for us. And all the places that we've helped open, it's like, oh, use this Orcade place and have them track scores, because that creates repeat players. Like they'll want to come back and
interest in the machines, interest in the arcades.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you have some sort of consultancy opening or assisting in the opening of new arcades.
Yeah, we've helped 22 arcades open worldwide.
How many in the States? Is approximately
in the States, there's probably 16 or 17 that were here in the
US. Good number. So we've seen a massive shrinking of arcades, but is there now like record stores are coming back in some fashion?
Now that we've kind of made it pretty public that we share everything. We share our business model. We have people fly in. We teach them all the tech side of it.
So if people want to apprentice as an arcade owner,
we have people come in for the weekend and shadow us, basically.
Wow.
There's been a lot of towns that have been against arcades opening.
Not a bad element.
That's what they thought. But we've flown out. There was one in California. I flew out and I spoke at their city council meeting and helped them change the. It's not a bad thing. It helps so much for the town, because you're bringing, for us last year, there's 80,000 people coming to the arcade a year. Do you think there's a difference between what you're doing? There are a couple of sort of retro arcades in the city that are built around kind of office parties and what I would call a bro culture, right? Kind of vomitorium. It sounds like you guys have a kind of a different aesthetic. That you're really participating in a subculture that it's a remnant subculture from the 70s and the 80s. It really, like the barcade scene.
Barcade, thank you.
They have the places that allow alcohol at them, and we've helped some open. It's an incredible business model because there's so much money to be made on alcohol.
Yeah.
It's the problem is that at that point, when you look at your numbers, it's like, oh, we have all these machines that take all these effort to
Why
keep
don't we
up
just
and running.
become a bar?
Pretty much.
Right.
It's a lot of our regulars, and there's some great ones out there. There's Logan's Arcade, like that guy's a true arcade
Really great
collector,
and
He
also a
loves
great
this stuff.
record store.
Yeah.
Best in the city.
He's doing it very well. But they're just different because the draw to it is the alcohol. So you get people that
Don't care.
it's their arcade games. Some of those people
Novel.
don't want to. Yeah, it's not that it's a niche. Like, I wouldn't say it's not a gimmick. Like, I've seen places that open and use it as a gimmick, which is, though, honestly, the people that are trying to open arcades are like, wow, I'm going to make $1 million here. Like, I see what this place is doing. I can do that. If you don't want to grow the culture of it, it's often difficult to maintain. Like, the hardcore players see
I was
right through
gonna say
it.
they're not going to the barcade scene.
A lot of our regular players, they'll set a bunch of scores, and then they'll be like, oh, well, this wasn't working and this wasn't working. And that's a problematic thing. But for us, making sure everything is playing right is so important. Giving the people new things. And I can't not talk about, every time I talk about arcade games, like, I'm excited for it. And I just love this stuff, and I love tracking down rare games, and it's fun for me. But then to share this stuff with people, and you see the parents and their kids, and everybody's enjoying it. And in going on 8 years, there's never been one fight there. There's never been one raised voice. It's like everybody is so appreciative of it. Saturdays I go down there now, and I'm just some guy that opened an arcade, but people know who I am, and it's like I'm shaking hands all day, and people are like,
The mayor of
thank you for doing
Ghost,
this," and
yeah.
it's like,
Well, he is the Ghost Lord.
Ghost Lord.
Let's get our terminology correct.
What you mentioned this New Hampshire-based arcade that was at one time, or may still be the largest. Where do you rank? Where does the
we're
Ghost?
the largest in the world now. It's 643. Fun Spot had they'd scaled back because they're part museum, and like they're still a great place. Like, they have a lot of very rare games. They try to keep it all very good and maintain their machines. But the draw to them, they're bigger than that. They've got like go-karts and indoor golf. So they have all these other elements. And it's the same thing like with the barcades. It's like, for us, we focus on arcades. Like, we used to have party packages and stuff, and party rooms and console gaming. We tore all that out. We used to have pizzas at the front counter. It's just like,
games.
We want to do games, and we want to do it as well as we can. We were told, don't ever ask for a liquor license in this place. And it's like, okay, I won't. But after 8 months of being open or so, they were like, oh, would that help you guys? Like, you're bringing so many people to the town, is it something you'd maybe want? It's like, no. I'm like, I want to have kids here all night. And like it was back in the day, it was like, just come here and play games, have it be very safe, have parents and their kids, give them something to do.
Yeah, I remember being just dropped off.
Yeah.
And people would come back hours later, right? We'd be at haunted trails.
I was there often. It's the craziest thing. Again, one of the things that in us helping places open, everybody's terrified of opening a place. Like, there's a lot of data that it's a difficult business.
It's like
to
being
open.
in a restaurant business or something. You're going to fail.
There's been a lot of there was a gastrocade, which was a high-end
Ouch.
chef on.
Oh, God. The
And-
worst of all trends.
And it opened.
I hope
and
somebody
closed.
burned it to the ground. Right? But save the machines.
Save the machines, of course. But it doesn't make any sense. It's literally like it's so unsettling what we do. It would seem like fiscal and business suicide, the things that we do. Like, we give away a ton of stuff. just constantly. It's free drinks. It's free day passes. Like I get approached several times a week, just out. I'll be out shopping, and somebody will come up and be like, "Oh, I love the arcade." It's like, "Oh, I love hearing that."
Right.
So like, here's a day pass. You're on me. Here's some passes
Come
for
back.
your friends. Come back. And it's like I went through 1,000 day passes. Like my guy that from our production side, Brandon, he's like, "Why are we going through so many day passes?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm giving
them
all
away."
those away." Yeah, but it's hard not to.
Yeah.
And fiscally, it seems like this, like who would do that?
But it
And
sounds like they're coming back. I mean, they come for a day and they
Yeah.
come for another. So is it only day passes? It's $20, or is there a? Can you buy a seasonal pass?
we have
in Great America?
weekly,
Lifetime
monthly.
membership.
Uh-huh.
We have a lifetime membership.
Of course.
When we were expanding, we invented this lifetime membership, and people were, "Oh, it's going to make the arcade expand? Oh yeah, I'll pay that." Like, and
This was your GoFundMe.
pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
It's been so interesting. We have so many people right now. There's over 120 people that we're talking to that are trying to open arcades. And it's just
And this is internationally.
internationally. Many of them here in the U.S., but it's so nobody knows where to start.
Mhm.
There's some that we've had one couple in from Philadelphia, and they came out and they're like, "Oh no, I can't. I wouldn't want
much.
to do this. It really needs the right person to open it. There has to be."
Well, you're clearly very passionate about the culture of gaming. So I want to ask you a question about Mortal Kombat. It seems like this is the game at the heart of your enterprise, and the game at the heart of, I don't know, some of modern gaming. It's a violent game. I have two questions. What do you think is the appeal of violence in video games as opposed to like puzzle solving or something like that? And then I want to ask about, I mean, we have a president who pops off about a lot of things in the wake of shootings and other events, but many people over the last 30 years have blamed social violence on gaming violence. And so I want to kind of end there, but what's the appeal? And I'm, first-person shooters, all these big games. Mortal Kombat, way back, very bloody game, right? What's the appeal? Why violence in video games? Is it boys?
No, it's and like I said, it's like, it's not that it's a gender thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, Caitlin Oliver, she's playing a game called Splatterhouse.
Yeah, I was
It's
going to
a
say that didn't
bloody, violent game.
That
and
didn't
it's-
sound like it was paint splatters.
No, yeah. But it honestly, I've been playing video games since 5 years old, and obviously the visuals weren't where they are now,
Mm-hmm.
but it's never been about it being violent, and that's always been the big thing with Mortal Kombat. It's kind of known for its blood and gore, and that's all. Like, the media side of it talks about the blood and gore,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, wow, did you see that guy rip that guy's head off or pulled his heart out? And it's like, it's a pretty heavy thing to do to somebody, and yeah, it's violent and it's gory. But honestly, for the players who played the game day in and day out, the finishing moves, they call them fatalities,
Mm-hmm.
they don't do them. It's not about that. It's not about seeing the violence over and over and over. It's a genuinely good game, and it's fun to play, and it's the timing of it. And no, the players aren't seeing the blood splatters anymore. To them, it's no different than a puzzle game. It's no different than Pac-Man or Space Invaders. One of the most amazing things, like the psychology of watching gamers play and seeing what goes on there, has been a tremendous, like, I hear everybody saying, "Oh, it's the violence in video games, it's making everybody crazy." But we can look at our event that we hold every year. It was originally called Shang Tsung's Fight Night, and now it's called Combat Con. And Shang Tsung was a character from Mortal Kombat, and it was this giant tournament. Now, our last one we had last October, and we had about 500. We couldn't hold it in the arcade anymore because it's too much. We needed a bigger venue. We had 500 people come in, and some flew in for the entire week. And there was people from Chile, Argentina, Australia, Luxembourg, everybody from all over the U.S. All come to participate and appreciate this violent video game.
Mm-hmm.
And you have actors from the arcade game like Daniel Pacino, the guys that run the Galloping Ghost Gamma, like Daniel Pacino and John Parrish and Philip Ahn. We have all the actors from Mortal Kombat. And this is supposed to be this giant violent video game, but you have 500 people from around the world. It's not about gender, it's not about age, it's not about where you came from. You can go look at 2,000 pictures online that were taken from that weekend. There's no fights.
Mm-hmm.
There's literally the world getting along in a harmonious way for 7 days. And it's like, if you have your vantage point from back here looking down on it, it's like, how is this possible? There's no religion. It's none of it. It's just people enjoying this terribly violent video game.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody's getting along. And it's like, it's not about the violence. They talk about it, and yeah, there's finishing moves in the new Mortal Kombat where you'll watch them once or twice, and it's like, oh man, that's crazy. That was brutal.
I just remember like the spinal removal, right?
Yeah.
No.
But
that's not what you don't see that. That you're saying that your experience isn't that it is a violent game that begets violence, or that people who are prone to violence are drawn to the games.
No.
And this is what we hear about with first-person shooter games: is that we really need to clamp down on the entertainment industry because they're responsible for AR-15 violence in this country, etc.
It's with the amount of games that are played in a single day at the arcade. It's like you would think you would have a bunch of crazy people walking up and down. It's like this would be
all the psychos on Ogden Avenue. Yeah.
There's never been a raised voice at the place. Cops have never come.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing. And it's like, if you have all the violent video games in the world like centralized, that place, you would see it. You would think. You get people coming in from Japan and everywhere, and it's like, it's nothing but smiles, and
It's fun.
It's not like you go to the city, you'll have people that won't make eye contact. Everybody that walks in this place, you're friends. And it's like you go up to them and it's like, oh, do this in this game, and you'll get these extra points. And it's like, it's so, from the outside, you just see it as, it's an arcade. It's a building with a bunch of video games in it. But I see it as like, it's something you can't even explain it, because I'd sound like a crazy person if I was like, yeah, here's this utopian society of everyone and everybody gets along. And people are going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, it's not going to work like that. You have violent.
So it sounds like your point is we should be spending more time in the arcade.
It's
might be good for my mental health.
Hey, before we go, one thing I wanted to ask you, because I've never asked you this before. When the arcade was going to open, Steve called me. He's like, "Oh, there's an arcade going to open." I'm like, "All right, well, I guess we'll do a story about that." Okay, the guy you need to call, his name's Doc Mack, and he's been working on a video game for 20 years, and I'm like, all right. So I'm going to be calling Doc Brown from Back to the Future here, and
Right.
And instead, out walks Doc Mack. So, how long have you been called Doc?
Forever.
Where did this come from? Does anyone call you by your actual name?
That's it. That's what I go by. We have the big thing for us. Everyone asks about the logo, and it's like the Galloping Ghost. Like, where did that start? Where did that come from? And it's like it was initially off of a World War II bomb. Like, the concept for it was off of a World War II bomber. My brother was transcribing a book, and he was an artist. He redrew the logo, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. Like, this ghost on this rocket with a horse head on it, throwing bombs and stuff. And I redrew it 1,000 times, and it just kept evolving. And I was 16, right before I opened Galloping Ghost. I got it tattooed on me. And I was just talking to some industry guy, and we were talking about game design, game development, and he's like, do you work for a company? And I was, are you your own thing? I was like, yeah, I'm Galloping Ghost Productions. And it just kind of stuck ever since. And it's not, to me, I look at it and it's like, it's not the most inviting, kid-friendly logo. Like, it's from a World War II bomber, not exactly the kid-friendly thing or family-friendly thing, which was bizarre. But it's so amazing to me, one, to see so many ghost logos on Ogden Avenue, but people are taking the logo, and I see 7 days a week people taking pictures of it, and it's on Instagram, and people posting on just everywhere.
That's fun. That's a good sign for a trademark or for a brand.
It's people seem to recognize it very easily, so it works.
Well, Doc, I tell you what. I mean, we're going to wrap it up, but I'm definitely going to come. I mean, not that this is an ad, but it seems. I mean, I want to try it.
It's kind of overwhelming actually when you walk because you walk through these rows of games, and then there's another room, and you're like, oh, that's probably a little room, but it's a giant room with more games, and then you walk.
It's like Alice in Wonderland,
and and you're like, okay, there's a door. This must be another small room, and it's an entire storefront with more games. It's just it never stops. So.
We call it the labyrinth now. It's
like the Art Institute of arcades. I'll just work one room at a time. Right.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks a lot again.
And Doc, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank
Doc
you.
Mack,
Thank
Galloping
you.
Ghost. Is that to give the address again?
It's 9415 Ogden Avenue in Brookfield.
And your website is?
Gallopingghost.com.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it.